First off, let me start off by saying welcome to Total Auto Glass. I hope you enjoyed this quick little training session before going on to the next step and starting your hands-on learning out in the field. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be talking about. We got a couple of safety things we got to cover, some quick equipment and helpful information while you're using the equipment, and then we'll start going over how to remove the windshield and or glass depending on what vehicle you're using, installing the windshield and or glass depending of course of what you're working on, and then we'll go over a couple of final thoughts overall and perhaps even answer a few more questions that may pop up throughout the course. So our first topic of study will probably be our safety course. Um, we can't send you out in the field without having a little bit of a rough idea of what you'll be encountering out in the field. And so, just to make things clear, because we work with so many warehouses, a lot of them have their own restrictions and their own rules. So, just be aware of your location for sure. So, first rule of thumb when it comes to safety, always wear your safety boots. Your steel-toed boots, make sure they're closed-toed. There are a lot of things that can get into your shoe, especially if you do decide to wear shorts, especially in this Texas heat. We do allow shorts because of this reason. Um, you can wear pants. We have no problem with you wearing pants or shorts. The main concern is that you protect your feet and your toes because you will be working with heavy equipment and heavy glass. So for sure, always wear your steel-toed boots. When it comes to protective eyewear, there are cases that you will need it 100% of the time, and a lot of times you don't have to wear them on the sites that you'll be going to. Just be sure to have them on you at all times because you never know when the event may arise where glass can fly in your face or something like that. Now, the best course of action is to wear them at all times, but we do understand that a lot of times it is just not necessary for extracting or installing the glass itself. So it's not 100% necessary, but it is necessary to have them on you. The same thing with our glove policy. Now, there are very much occasions that you are better off wearing gloves at all times. We also do have times where it's probably better for you to wear them just because of how hot the glass gets when you're on the job. So be sure that you have them on you and be aware of the fact that the glass does get hot, especially in this Texas heat. So unlike the first three, where you for sure will need them at some point in your job, this last one is more of a depending on the job site and depending on what you're doing situation. Dust mask, depending on if the area that you're putting the glass in could cause some debris to come and be inhaled because of rust or leakage and stuff like that. Reflective vest is normally dependent on where you are. So if you're at a warehouse, you're more than likely to have to wear them because of their policies and not necessarily because of ours. Protective sleeves are something that is useful, not necessarily needed, but it is useful to protect your skin, especially if you're not wearing long sleeves. Again, we do not restrict clothing because of the fact that it is so hot in Texas. So short sleeve and shorts are fine on the job, though in some cases you might want to at least keep a long sleeve shirt in your car just because the long sleeve can protect you on certain jobs, especially when you're touching the glass. It could be helpful to prevent burning on your skin. So here's when we start getting into the actual work that you'll be doing. We're going to go over some equipment that you may need, like to use, and things that for sure will be very helpful. Not all equipment is necessary, but a majority of the equipment is probably nice to have occasionally. It's just going to depend on your skill level and it's going to depend on how comfortable you are using specific tools. So of course, the first things first, the necessary tools you will absolutely need no matter what the case is going to be. You're going to need your caulking gun, you're going to need your cutout knives, you're going to need the blades that go on the cutting knives or the blades for your long knife, a lace tool, some chuck sticks, definitely a hook tool, and then the glass rack. These are things that are absolutely necessary when you're going on a job. Every now and then, you'll need a suction cup, depending on whether you have a buddy or not. Suction cups are definitely necessary as well. Some helpful tools that are potentially necessary are the saw and the little buddy. The little buddy is definitely something depending on your skill level and depending on if you actually have another partner with you on the job. Um, we'll talk more about some of these things in other slides further down the line. So some of these other tools are definitely not necessary. They could be helpful and useful to you for maybe specialized jobs, but on a day-to-day usage level, you're probably never really going to use them. An apron is definitely something that is by choice. Maybe you prefer to stay cleaner than other times or whatever the case may be. But everything else really can be done using either other tools that you may have handy, or some tools are just specifically specialized for if you were looking for something extra detailed, where it's like a classic car, or if the case comes to the fact that you need extra help pulling something out or whatever the case may be. The specialized tools are nice, but definitely not worth taking the time to buy them unless you have the job already in the books to do and need them. So now we'll move on forward to the process of cutting out the windshield. There are different methods to do it, and then it's just going to depend on your preference once you're out in the field. When it comes to the removal method, there are three main methods. The growing popular one is definitely the saw method, and you can see that in the video that he's cutting out the windshield with the saw along the bottom. The problem with this method is that it does tend to mess up the vehicle. So if you know you're working on a higher priced vehicle, try not to use this method unless absolutely necessary, because sometimes the windshield is too close to the body of the vehicle and some damage may occur, especially when you're using the saw. Another common method is using the cutout knives. Now I don't have a picture of the cutout knives on this slide, but if you go back to the previous slide, you can see a small image of the cutout knives. This is probably the most efficient method next to the saw and probably the cleanest method. You're less likely to get vehicle damage with the cutout knives, though it can be a little difficult in some areas because if you can't fit the cutout knife into the hole, it becomes very difficult. Um, but ultimately, if you're trying very hard not to scratch the vehicle, this is the best method next to our next method, though I don't know how common the next method is. For the last method, now personally, I don't use the string method. It takes a lot of time to set up, so it's not the most commonly used unless you're removing a glass and putting it back in for body work, is what I've seen this used on mostly. Now, for an everyday truck or 18 wheeler or whatever the case may be, I've never really seen it out in the field too often. But of course, that's just going to depend on your preference. The setup time for this is extremely tedious and long, so you may have to mind the time depending on if you have another job to go to. Now, when it comes to glue trimming, it's really going to depend on the vehicle, whether it's been done before, the type of glass that you're removing. As you can see on the top left, I would have, in that situation, you would have to cut out all the glue, no matter what, just because of how the glass breaks. Whereas in the truck picture, you may just have to remove any excess glue or glue that may not have stuck onto the body of the truck due to previous work that was done. So it really is a case by case situation when it comes to glass trimming. If you know that the glass was so close to the body when you were removing it, it could be in your better interest to leaving that glue on as long as it stuck well originally, just so that you can be more comfortable the next time that you have to do this vehicle. Especially since we do have accounts where we're constantly going back to the same vehicles, you want to set yourself up in the next time, that way you have no issues. So here we'll start talking about how to actually install the glass itself. And here there are also a couple of methods that you can use. Everything's again going to have to depend on your skill level, especially for starting out, um, and how confident you feel once you get the hang of doing things. Running glue is probably the most important part about installing the windshield, because if you don't run the glue properly in this whole process, then you're more likely to have a glass that leaks. And then we'll have to go back and redo the glass or refund the customer. It's very important part of the job. Um, as you can see on the bottom, if you're working on a truck or a vehicle like this, you're more than likely going to run the glue on the body. There are some instances where you have some technicians that do run it on the glass. Again, this is more of a preference situation, but I do find that doing it on the body when it comes to regular vehicles is just a little bit more exact, and you don't have to worry about getting the glue dirty while you're messing up the glue while you're installing. Now again, as you can see on the top right corner of the video, he is running glue on the glass. Now again, in some situations, you're going to have to run it on the glass over the body 100% of the time. It's really just going to depend on your preference and whatever you're working on. In this situation, he's working on an 18-wheeler, and because it is a tempered glass, it is more effective for him to run it on the glass over the body. Now, the effectiveness of how you touch up your glue is also very important to prevent leaking of the glass. So when you do this, especially once you're out in the field, you'll be able to see if you don't touch up your glue properly, you'll create a pinhole which will cause the glass to leak almost 100% of the time if you don't have the glue making contact. Especially if you see in the top video when he's running glue on the glass, he changes glues several times, and you have to touch up every time you change glues, because if you don't, your glues won't be overlapping, and if they don't overlap, you have a leak. So this is very important, especially if you know you won't get enough glue in one tube. Now once you have everything set up and cleaned out and touched up, this part is really going to depend on your skill level, whether you have a buddy, the vehicle itself, and if you want to use the little buddy equipment. As you can see in the situations that I have in this slide, all of these can be done by themselves. Obviously with the truck, you can use the little buddy. That's the system that we had talked about earlier. And I have never used the little buddy myself, but it is common for those that feel the need to do so. That way they feel that they're covered when it comes to installing the glass, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you're doing a bigger vehicle, you're probably better off having an actual partner than trying to do it by yourself. Though they can be done by themselves, there's no need for you to strain yourself to try to get it done by yourself if you know you can have a partner or should have a partner. So I know we covered a lot of things in this video, but do understand that a lot of these things you really won't grasp all the information until you put hands on everything. Um, this is really a job that requires you to be at the job learning the thing versus just listening and taking in information. So please remember that when you're watching this video and when you go on the field and start training. So remember, we learned about our safety. We need our steel toe boots, we need our protective eyewear, we need our gloves. Of course, depending on the job site, you will need other equipment, but for the most part, if you have those three things, you're good to go. Now, also remember, in this Texas heat, you need to stay hydrated and have a hat or some cooling stuff. Make sure you drink plenty of water. So remember, please stay safe when you're on the job. Remember, when it comes to removal, we went through three main methods. Be careful if you're using the saw. It's a little longer if you use the cutout knives, but it takes the longest if you use the string method. So remember, be careful with your timing, especially when you got other jobs, and be careful to not hurt or scratch the vehicles in any way, shape, or form. This is really important, especially when it comes to the removal. With the installation, remember to take care of your glue because the glue is probably the most important part of the whole installation process other than not breaking the windshield. We don't want any leaks, and the glue is the main component when it comes to that. Other than that, you're pretty much free to do any of the methods that works best for you. Again, I hope you feel a little bit more prepared when you go on the field and start working on your first jobs, and I hope your training is successful when you're finally out there.